In the future world, aliens suddenly invade the Earth. A fierce battle breaks out between the two sides. The entire Earth's environment has been completely transformed. However, as the investigation deepened, it was discovered that these aliens had merely come to escape death. The spaceship comes from the distant planet Votan. 7 different races once lived on that planet, but for some reason, the entire planet was destroyed. They had to flee to Earth. These alien survivors hoped to settle on Earth and live together with humans. For this reason, the aliens and Earth engaged in negotiations for as long as 6 years. However, in the end, the Earth government still rejected the aliens' request. Faced with the choice between life and death, the Votans immediately chose a more drastic way to ensure their survival. Thus, they launched an attack on Earth. This interstellar war lasted for 9 years. The entire world was left in ruins. The surface environment was completely altered. It became less suitable for survival, both for humans and aliens. To avoid further damage to Earth, both sides had to return to the negotiating table. With great difficulty, the two sides reached a peace agreement, allowing the aliens to live here, and thus began the long process of integration between Earthlings and Votans. Many years after that Great War, conflicts still broke out between the two sides for various reasons. Earthling Nolan and his adopted daughter Irisa made a living by scavenging the remains. After conflicts between the two sides, unlike Nolan, who is a pure-blooded Earthling, Irisa is half-blooded from an alien race called the Irathiant. Therefore, she has certain alien characteristics. Irisa's parents were killed in the war, and she was adopted by Nolan from a young age. In a sense, although they are not father and daughter, they are closer than a real father and daughter. On this day, Nolan was driving in search of Ark wreckage, with Irisa sitting beside him. After years of training, Irisa had become Nolan's most capable assistant. Although they made a living by selling precious items from the wreckage, they harbored a dream of going to Antarctica. Since that interstellar war, the once cold Antarctica had been transformed into a paradise on Earth. Many people dreamed of going there, just as the two were immersed in fantasies of a better life. The radar in the car suddenly beeped. They detected an alien Ark wreckage not far away. The two rushed to the scene at top speed. After a simple survey, they were pleasantly surprised to find this spaceship had crashed not long ago, and only its outer shell was slightly damaged. This meant that there was a high probability of abundant supplies inside. If they found precious treasures, perhaps they could fulfill their dream of saving enough money to go to Antarctica. The two couldn't wait to enter the energy supply area of the spaceship. They found that it was still intact. The experienced Nolan immediately took out a glowing device. After some operations, a polyhedron slowly appeared. This is the energy source required for the Ark to operate. It is also the highest masterpiece of Votan technology, known as the Great Earth Sphere. The Earth government had been purchasing these treasures to study the science and technology of Votan, perhaps because the Ark crashed too quickly. The energy in the Great Earth Sphere was still abundant. Undoubtedly, it could be sold for a better price. Irisa excitedly hugged her father, because as long as they sold it, they could realize their dream of going to Antarctica to experience paradise. Nolan was equally excited. He carefully put the Great Earth Sphere into his bag and protected it carefully. Then they planned to leave in a hurry with this treasure. At this moment, they noticed some unusual sounds. Only then did the father and daughter notice that many aliens had gathered outside the wreckage, though they didn't know when. They were bounty hunters from the Irathiant race, known as Soul Riders. They had obviously set their sights on the treasure in the Ark as well. Nolan and Irisa were only 2 people. It was impossible to confront these guys head-on, so he planned to find a place to hide, and then take the opportunity to escape. But plans couldn't keep up with changes. The next second, the two encountered the Soul Riders. Irisa was immediately controlled and taken hostage by them. Nolan had to raise his hands and surrender. The Soul Riders quickly confiscated his weapons, then they forced the two to hand over all valuable items on them. Nolan hesitated for a moment, then took out all his items except the Great Earth Sphere. The Soul Riders were naturally dissatisfied. When they saw only these low-value items, they didn't believe that the two had entered the Ark wreckage and found nothing, so they immediately pulled out their guns and aimed at Irisa. They stated that if Nolan didn't take out valuable items, they would shoot Irisa on the spot. In the face of the Soul Rider's threat, Nolan almost didn't hesitate to choose Irisa's life. After all, for him, money could be earned again if lost. But Irisa was one of a kind. Just as Nolan was about to open his backpack to take out the Great Earth Sphere, he accidentally caught a glimpse of a sharp dagger in Irisa's hand. Nolan's eyes met his daughter's. The tacit understanding developed over the years made them instantly understand each other. The next second, Irisa suddenly exerted strength and broke free from the restraints behind her. Nolan also struck almost at the same time, quickly seizing the weapon from the enemy's hand. Then they fought and retreated, fleeing all the way into the nearby dense forest. The two of them raced recklessly through the forest without daring to stop. After a long time, the two thought they had shaken off the Soul Riders. Irisa suddenly collapsed. Nolan hurried forward to check and found the wound on Irisa, it turned out that during the battle just now, Irisa had been shot in the lower abdomen. Now, the bleeding couldn't be stopped, and she couldn't move. Nolan picked up Irisa and continued to run forward, searching for a place for treatment along the way. But after a long time, there was still no sign of anything. At this point, Nolan's strength was gradually exhausted, and he had to take a temporary rest. However, it seemed that heaven didn't intend to give him a chance to catch his breath. The next second, several strange cries came from the forest. The experienced Nolan immediately recognized the source of the roars. Ignoring the fear in his heart, he quickly took out tools and dug a hole in the ground. He buried the great earth sphere in the soil, then he took out his gun, and searched for the monsters lying in ambush around. After a while, Nolan found the monster approaching him from behind. Nolan, holding a weapon, was actually not afraid of this kind of monster at all. He killed it with 2 shots. But the most troublesome thing is that this creature is social. Every time they move, they must be in a group. So, right after Nolan killed the monster, many black monsters immediately surrounded him from all directions. Nolan kept firing, but even after he emptied his bullets, he couldn't kill all these monsters. At this moment, Nolan's heart was filled with despair. He thought he was about to become the monster's food. However, at this moment, more gunshots were heard. Before Nolan could react, he saw several more monsters being shot dead. Seeing that the situation was bad, those creatures decisively abandoned Nolan and fled in a hurry. Not long after, several men in black walked out of the woods. Nolan thanked them for their rescue. Later, through communication with these people, he learned that they were from a small town not far away. It was called the City of Resistance. The entire city was protected by an energy shield. People in the city could live a stable life. There were many Votans there. They could live in peace with humans. Under the governance of the mayor, aliens and humans were equal, and worked together to build the city. Hearing this, Nolan was full of interest in the City of Resistance. He said he wanted to go there with them, but the next moment, Nolan, who had relaxed, collapsed to the ground because he was too tired. He could only be taken back by those men in black. When Nolan woke up again, he found himself in a hospital. However, his hands were cuffed. It's just that Nolan could easily open this level of handcuffs. Then Nolan noticed an alien man sitting beside him. Through communication, he learned that this man was named Ian, and was a doctor here. He was also a member of the Indogene race. Because Ian was present, Nolan had to lie down and continue to pretend to be restrained by the handcuffs. After a while, a man in black walked into the ward. Nolan recognized that this man was the leader of the men in black who had rescued him earlier. This man was a law enforcer of the City of Resistance. As soon as the law enforcer entered the ward, he asked the doctor about the condition of Nolan and the other person. Ian said they were not seriously injured. Then he asked Nolan to communicate with the law enforcer in person. When the other party saw the handcuffs on Nolan's hands, he couldn't help frowning. Immediately after, he reprimanded the young man beside him. That man was the law enforcer's assistant. It was he who had cuffed Nolan. Faced with the law enforcer's criticism, the assistant plausibly defended himself. He claimed that Nolan was obviously a dangerous person, because he had a weapon before and must be controlled. Although Nolan's weapon had been confiscated before he was sent to the hospital, but this still couldn't change the fact that he was a dangerous person. The law enforcer didn't say much about the assistant's argument, and immediately ordered him to unlock Nolan. The assistant reluctantly prepared to unlock the handcuffs for him, only to find that Nolan had already opened them himself. This behavior perfectly showed Nolan's sincerity. He clearly had the ability to escape, but he had been following the rules of the City of Resistance, so the law enforcer highly appreciated Nolan. He friendly stretched out his hand to Nolan and introduced himself, and he invited him to go to the mayor's office to discuss how to deal with Nolan's subsequent matters. In this way, Nolan met Mayor Amanda. As soon as he saw her, he couldn't wait to ask Amanda for his weapon, but he was firmly rejected by her. According to the regulations of the City of Resistance, no one except law enforcers could carry weapons. Amanda said that she would return the weapon to Nolan. When he and the other person were about to leave the City of Resistance, Nolan had to change his approach, and said that he made a living with weapons. If he didn't have weapons, he would starve to death sooner or later. Amanda seemed to have expected this. She said that there were many ways to make money in the City of Resistance, and no weapons were needed. Then Amanda told Nolan in a teasing tone, if he was in urgent need of money, he could get a job in a bar with his handsome looks. He failed to get his weapon back from this woman. Nolan could only leave in disappointment. He originally wanted to leave the City of Resistance like this, but considering that Irisa had not yet recovered, he had to stay here for a few more days. At this moment, Nolan was actually seriously considering what Amanda had said. Not long after, he came to a bar to find a suitable job, but he happened to encounter a dispute. The two sides were the two largest forces in the City of Resistance. To put it simply, Arak, the eldest son of the alien Dadak family, fell in love with Angie, the daughter of the human Raf family. Their sworn enemies, the two secretly met in the bar but were caught by their families. Angie's brother Luke brought people to separate them. Luke firmly opposed their relationship, he severely warned Iraq to stay away from his sister. Iraq insisted that they were truly in love, so he refused to leave Angie. Upon hearing this, Luke was immediately furious. Immediately afterwards, a scuffle broke out between the two sides. In the end, if it weren't for Angie's younger brother Quentin pulling them apart in time, I'm afraid things would never have ended so easily. But even so, Luke still said that if Iraq didn't leave his sister, he would hire someone to kill him. Iraq didn't take such threats to heart. He immediately said that if Luke dared to stop him again, he would teach him a lesson. However, no one expected that this would be Luke's last appearance. With the end of this farce, Nolan also remembered his own business, looking for a suitable job in the bar. Just as Amanda said, Nolan attracted many beautiful women just with his appearance. However, he seemed to have no interest in these people, and was only focused on making money. At this moment, a woman took the initiative to come to Nolan's side. She asked if he was looking for a job. Nolan hurriedly asked where he could make money. The woman didn't say much, just gave him an address. Nolan and Irisa followed the address, and found that it was a fighting arena. Nolan looked at the people fighting fiercely in the ring, and instantly understood what the woman meant. This really fit Nolan's idea perfectly. As long as he could defeat everyone here, then getting rich would be just around the corner. Looking at the not-so-mighty opponent in the ring, Nolan couldn't wait to take off his clothes, and prepare to join the challengers. Soon, the match in the ring came to a conclusion. Nolan immediately raised his hand, and entered the ring as a new challenger. Everyone, including the referee, looked confused at the man who suddenly burst in. After simply asking the owner of the fighting arena, Datak, the person in charge allowed Nolan to compete. However, his opponent wasn't the current contestant, but a terrifying cyborg. Nolan immediately looked frightened, and said he wanted to withdraw from the competition. But he was warned that doing so would make him lose all his bets. Perhaps recalling that he was penniless at the moment, Nolan had no choice but to participate in the upcoming fight. Compared to the tall and mighty cyborg, Nolan looked like an underdeveloped dwarf. In the subsequent battle, the cyborg also unleashed combat power far exceeding that of humans. Not long after the official start of the match, Nolan was knocked to the ground. However, he never gave up. The audience around immediately realized that Nolan's strength was far from enough to defeat the cyborg, so they all placed their bets on the cyborg, preparing to make a big profit from this opportunity. However, these people didn't expect, in fact, all this was a money-making scheme, carefully designed by Nolan from the very beginning. Seeing that all the audience present, except Irisa, were frantically betting on the cyborg, Nolan knew it was time to reap the rewards. Then Nolan, who had just been beaten and unable to fight back, suddenly burst out with great strength. Moreover, his figure was more agile than before, easily dodging a series of attacks from the cyborg. Finally, he knocked the cyborg to the ground. Watching the cyborg crash to the ground, the entire audience fell silent. They couldn't believe that a human had defeated a cyborg, although the referee was equally shocked, but he still raised Nolan's hand, announcing that he had won the battle. The father and daughter made a lot of money. They walked while excitedly counting the money in their hands, dreaming about their wish to go to Antarctica later. But before they could walk out of the fighting arena, they were stopped at the door by the owner Datak. Nolan and Irisa immediately became alert, thinking that the other party couldn't afford to lose, and in fact, it was almost the case. Datak clearly told them that this was his territory. Then Datak told Nolan, using a sweep to win was prohibited in his territory, and Nolan had used this move in the previous fight, so Datak wanted to deprive him of his victory, and recover the bet money. Seeing that the other party wanted to take back the money they had worked so hard to get, with just a few words, Irisa naturally wouldn't agree. Even though she hadn't fully recovered yet, she still made up her mind to teach Datak a lesson. Seeing that the situation was about to get out of control, Nolan quickly stopped her. Then he took out the money in his hand, and returned it all to Datak. The other party took the money contemptuously and counted it, as if worried that these two humans were playing tricks. After confirming that the amount was correct, Datak decided to let them go. He, thinking he was being merciful, took out a few bills from it, and returned their own bet money. His arrogant attitude made Nolan and Irisa extremely angry, but at this moment, they could only swallow their anger. Nolan sighed helplessly as he looked at the little money left in his hand. Relying solely on this money would probably make it difficult to survive here, let alone go to Antarctica. Nolan couldn't help but think of the time he was hijacked by the Soul Riders. If it weren't for those guys, he wouldn't have lost his car. Now he had to buy another one. To relieve his depression, Nolan went to the bar again, not only to drown his sorrows in alcohol, but also to look for new job opportunities. But he didn't expect that he had become someone else's job opportunity. He met a hot and unrestrained woman in the bar. The woman claimed to have fallen in love with him at first sight. Then, under the woman's strong pursuit, Nolan completely fell and had in-depth communication with her. The woman was named Kenya, and her main job was a bartender at the bar. What shocked Nolan the most was her other identity. Kenya was actually Mayor Amanda's biological sister. Perhaps because her behavior was too dissolute for Amanda to accept, so their relationship was very bad, almost completely cut off. Just as Nolan was having a wonderful night, the entire city of Resistance fell into chaos, because shortly after dark, a man's body was found in a corner of the city. The law enforcement immediately reported to the mayor, and everyone was in a state of panic, because the deceased was none other than Luke, the heir to the Rath family. This matter is very serious. A single misstep could lead to a full-scale war between the two families. For this reason, the mayor and the law enforcer went to Rath's residence in person, to explain the current situation to him. When Rath heard that his eldest son had been murdered, he flew into a rage immediately. At this moment, his second son Quentin, who was standing beside him, looked very nervous. Rath immediately guessed that Quentin must know some inside information. He immediately forced Quentin to tell everything he knew. Under his father's coercion, Quentin had no choice but to recount what had happened in the bar. Only then did Rath learn that before his eldest son Luke had the accident, he had discovered that his sister Angie was in love with Arak from the Datak family. Luke had taken people to separate them, which led to a conflict with the other party. When Luke was leaving, the angry Arak even threatened that if Luke dared to interfere again, he would teach Luke a lesson. In this way, Arak became the prime suspect in Luke's murder, although Mayor Amanda and others still had doubts. But Rath, whose mind was clouded by anger, had already decided that Arak was the murderer of his son. He led many of his men to seek revenge on Arak, even though the mayor and the law enforcer tried their best to calm him down, stating that they would handle the matter properly. But the irrational Rath couldn't listen to anyone's persuasion at all. Not long after, Rath led his men into the bar. They found Arak, who was carousing with others, and knew nothing about what had happened. Rath didn't immediately order his men to shoot him dead. Instead, he asked Arak to give him an explanation. Arak, who came from a prominent background, was inherently arrogant. He thought Rath was questioning him about his love for his daughter, so he dismissed it, stating that it was their own business, and Rath had no right to interfere. Seeing that the murderer was so arrogant, the anger in Rath's heart erupted completely. He questioned Arak why he could be so calm after committing murder. Upon hearing this, Arak was also confused. He didn't understand how he could be involved in a murder. After a moment of silence, Arak asked Rath what exactly had happened. Arak seemed to be truly unaware of Luke's death. When Arak learned that Luke was actually dead, he immediately understood why Rath was angry. He hurriedly explained to Rath that he had never thought of actually taking action. Moreover, since then, he had indeed been staying in the bar and had not left. It was impossible for him to go out and kill Luke. Rath didn't believe a word of Arak's statement, because apart from Arak, Rath couldn't think of anyone else who had such a deep grudge against his son Luke. No matter how Arak tried to prove himself, Rath only thought that the other party had colluded to deceive him. So he ordered his men to arrest Arak, ready to interrogate him severely. But at this moment, an unexpected person suddenly appeared between the two forces. This person was none other than Nolan, who was looking for a job. He sat down opposite Arak. Nolan hoped that Rath could spare Arak for the time being. As for this stranger from nowhere, Rath didn't take Nolan seriously at all. Moreover, at this moment, his heart was filled with grief over his son's death, and he had completely lost his reason. Seeing Nolan stop him, he immediately ordered his men to teach Nolan a lesson. Seeing that his men couldn't handle Nolan, the angry Rath immediately prepared to order more men to go and deal with him. At this moment, Irisa appeared quietly like a ghost. Before Rath could react, she held him hostage in front of all his men. Rath didn't dare to act rashly anymore. A few minutes later, the law enforcer arrived at the scene with Rath's daughter Angie. Looking at the scene in front of her, Angie had already guessed what had happened. She hurriedly told her father, Arak was indeed not the one who killed Luke, because she stayed with Arak during the time her brother was killed. There was no time to kill Luke at all. Regarding his daughter's testimony, Rath only thought that Arak had bewitched his daughter, thus helping him give false testimony. The more Rath thought about it, the angrier he got. Taking advantage of everyone's inattention, he actually pulled out a pistol and prepared to kill Arak. Although Irisa stepped in to stop him in time, but the tragedy still couldn't be avoided. However, because of Irisa's intervention, the bullet hit the law enforcer. With the sound of gunfire, the entire bar fell into chaos in an instant. Nolan hurried to suppress the scene. It took a long time to barely control the situation in the bar. It's just that because of this momentary delay, the law enforcer hit by the bullet had lost his breath. This sudden turn of events made the situation at the scene even more complicated. Not long after, Mayor Amanda hurried over upon hearing the news. At this time, Rath and Arak were still in a heated argument. The two even pointed their guns at each other. The situation was once so tense that it was out of control. It wasn't until the mayor shouted sharply that the two reluctantly put down their weapons. Regarding this tricky case, even Mayor Amanda felt at a loss as to how to proceed. Coupled with the unfortunate death of the law enforcer now, they had even less idea of how to investigate. Seeing that everyone was in a predicament, the law enforcer's assistant suddenly stepped forward, saying that he wanted to take on this responsibility, but the mayor firmly refused. because this case was of great importance, and the assistant was still young, and lacked experience in handling cases, there was a high possibility of mistakes. At that time, the situation might be completely out of control. Moreover, Raph was also full of doubts about this immature boy. With their veto, the assistant's dream of promotion was shattered. However, at this moment, Nolan, who had been silent all along, took the initiative to say that he could serve as the law enforcer. The mayor and others also deeply distrusted this outsider, until Nolan introduced his experience. They learned that he had also been a law enforcer, and had many years of experience in handling cases. Only then did the two relax a little. However, the important position of city law enforcer couldn't be given to Nolan, just based on his few words, so the mayor only let him serve as the interim law enforcer. Only after completing the investigation would his performance during this period determine whether he could take up the position. Raph also held the same attitude, but he promised Nolan generous benefits, as long as Nolan could successfully solve the case and provide conclusive evidence. Raph was willing to pay him 20,000 yuan as a reward for this investigation. In this way, Nolan became the interim law enforcer and began to investigate Luke's death. He first went to the scene where Luke's body was found, observing if there were any clues left by the murderer. After a careful investigation, he found some strange bloodstains on the ground. Nolan sniffed and knew that it was the blood of an Indogene. Then, through other traces at the scene, he deduced that this Indogene had an injured left foot. Hearing all the clues mentioned by Nolan, Mayor Amanda suddenly remembered that her secretary Benjamin was an Indogene, and he had accidentally injured his left leg not long ago. It was very likely that he was injured during the murder of Luke. Mayor Amanda hurriedly called Benjamin, trying to determine his location. However, Benjamin had long anticipated this. After committing the murder, he quickly packed his things and left. Now, receiving the mayor's sudden call, he knew he had been exposed. He claimed on the phone that all of this was out of necessity, and also said that the city of Resistance was about to face a huge disaster, hoping that the mayor could also leave quickly, and then hung up the phone. The group didn't get any information about Benjamin's location. It seemed that the hope of catching this murderer had been shattered. At this moment, Nolan said he already knew the other person's location. It turned out that Nolan heard a very loud noise from Benjamin's side, and the frequency was very unique. Nolan recognized that it was the noise of the city's protective shield. He deduced that Benjamin was now near the city's fence. The group hurriedly set out to search for Benjamin. Sure enough, they found Benjamin on the edge of the city. This guy was installing a bomb, trying to destroy the energy shield. But what Benjamin didn't know was, this device not only functions for the energy shield, but also has many other uses. The group hurried forward to stop him. When Benjamin saw the group rushing over, he immediately fought back. Seeing that this guy refused to give up without a fight, Raph immediately shot Benjamin down with a laser. Nolan and others rushed forward to restrain Benjamin, completely eliminating his means of resistance. Upon seeing the real murderer who killed his son, the anger in Raph's heart finally found an outlet. He raised his gun, intending to execute Benjamin on the spot, but was promptly stopped by Nolan. This made Raph confused, thinking that Nolan was going to plead for Benjamin. However, Nolan stated that he believed there was a mastermind behind this. Thus, he wanted to find out the real mastermind from Benjamin. After all, Benjamin had no grudge against Luke, so there was no need to kill him. Moreover, what this guy said earlier about the city of Resistance being about to fall was also very puzzling. Nolan believed that there must be a deeper secret hidden within. After hearing this, Raph also calmed down and thought that what Nolan said made sense. Under the questioning of the two, Benjamin finally revealed part of the truth. From this, everyone learned an army of Volge was marching towards the city of Resistance, intending to destroy the city. It's just that before Benjamin could explain why he killed Luke, the bomb he had planted earlier suddenly exploded. The entire town's defense system was thus completely paralyzed. Amanda realized the situation was dire, and didn't continue to investigate Luke's cause of death. She hurriedly gathered all the citizens to formulate the next defense plan. If nothing unexpected happens, the Volge will arrive soon. Of course, she didn't forget her previous promise. Nolan received the due reward for successfully capturing the culprit, and became an official city law enforcer. But at this point, this might not be a reward. Irisa obviously realized this too, so she planned to take Nolan and flee here before the Volge arrived, retrieve the Great Earth Sphere previously buried in the woods, then head to the dream paradise of Antarctica. But on their way out, Nolan saw the Volge army marching towards the city of Resistance. After hesitating for a long time, he decided to return to the city of Resistance to help resist the invasion. Nolan's decision was completely beyond Irisa's expectation. This made her very dissatisfied. After all, that paradise was a place they had been dreaming of. Now the opportunity was within reach, but Nolan wanted to give up. Irisa couldn't understand, and she didn't want to. Irisa wouldn't let this opportunity slip away anyway. This led to a fierce quarrel between the two. In the end, Irisa drove away in anger, while Nolan walked back to the city of Resistance alone. It wasn't long before Nolan returned to the City of Resistance with the Great Earth Sphere. At this point, he already had a plan to deal with the Vulge. As long as all the energy inside the Great Earth Sphere is released in an instant, it can form a large-scale energy shock, enough to repel the entire Vulge army. Then Nolan handed over the energy sphere to the relevant technical personnel. To prepare for a earth-shattering explosion, Nolan himself joined the citizens, and ambushed on the cliff with others, preparing to face the upcoming battle. However, before the war even started, some people wanted to flee out of fear, seeing that there was a deserter in his family. The clan leader Datak was very angry, but he didn't have time to punish this clansman, because the Vulge army had already arrived at the outskirts of the City of Resistance. The residents of the City of Resistance fired wildly at the invaders to defend their city. They did their utmost to stop them from advancing. However, the Vulge army was numerous. These ordinary people could only delay them a little. Just as the City of Resistance was about to be breached, reinforcements suddenly came from afar. To Nolan's surprise, it was Irisa who had returned. She also brought the Ghost Riders of the Irathian tribe. With their help, they were finally able to temporarily resist the attack of the Vulge army. Under their desperate resistance, the technicians finally completed the debugging. The Great Earth Sphere was about to explode, and all citizens quickly returned to the city. Before the Vulge could react, the technicians detonated the device. The entire Vulge army was wiped out. Everyone successfully defended the City of Resistance. However, this matter didn't end here. They still hadn't caught the mastermind who plotted this invasion behind Benjamin. Moreover, many people died in battle due to this resistance. Even Mayor Amanda was seriously injured. These troubles all needed to be dealt with. Amanda heard the battle losses reported by Nolan. She was determined to find these traitors to comfort the fallen soldiers. As the new law enforcer, this responsibility naturally fell on Nolan. At the same time, in a corner of the city, former Mayor Nikki was having a secret conversation with his subordinate. It could be learned from their conversation. It was they who instructed Benjamin to blow up the energy shield system, and it was also these two who lured the Vulge army afterward. It's just not known why they did all this. Nolan immediately started the investigation after taking over the task. During this period, he saw many people gathered on the street watching something. When he approached, he saw that the woman who had deserted was tied up and hung in the city. A basket was tied to the end of the rope. The woman's relatives kept putting stones into the basket. The weight of the stones kept tearing at the woman's body. Eventually, she died in pain. This cruel punishment was the Datak family's penalty for deserters. Nolan and Irisa tried to stop it but angered the clan leader Datak. Just as the dispute was unresolved, Mayor Amanda stepped in. To Nolan and others' surprise, Amanda not only allowed the ceremony to continue, she also pulled Nolan aside and told him not to meddle in the ethnic affairs of aliens in the future. Such an attitude made Nolan quite incomprehensible. Amanda gave her own explanation for this. Many years ago, they also implemented unified management. At that time, government officials went door to door to forcibly vaccinate children, but it caused the death of many alien children. Since then, the City of Resistance has acquiesced. The 7 alien races continue to practice their respective beliefs without human interference. Although Nolan understood the situation, he still thought it was unreasonable. However, Amanda firmly believed this was a necessary measure. On the other side, a person suddenly broke into Benjamin's hospital room. This person was a subordinate of former Mayor Nikki. He injected a mysterious substance into Benjamin's forehead. Then Benjamin, who had been in a coma, miraculously woke up. The man came to convey Nikki's order, threatening Benjamin to continue the plan, otherwise, they would kill his family. For the safety of his family, Benjamin had to obey. He was ordered to blow up the City of Resistance's energy reactor, attempting to kill everyone with radiation. At the same time, with Benjamin's arrest, Iraq was completely cleared of suspicion. His relationship with Angie developed rapidly, even reaching the point of discussing marriage. Naturally, the old father Raph was the first to oppose it, threatening to cut off relations with his daughter. In contrast, Datak approved of this marriage. He wasn't so open-minded, but thought there were benefits to be gained. According to Datak's plan, after his son Iraq married Angie, the Datak family would completely gain the upper hand in the struggle between the two families. Perhaps they would have the opportunity to swallow up Raph's family, so they strongly promoted this matter. Iraq's mother also encouraged Angie to resist to the end, and not bow to her father. Amidst the mutual intrigue between the two sides, Raph suddenly learned that his mine had exploded for some reason. He hurried to the mine. Shortly after, Nolan and Amanda also arrived at the mine. After a brief understanding, they learned it was actually Benjamin who attacked the mine guards and fled underground with 20 kilograms of explosives. Later, Nolan learned that the mine led to a place called St. Louis. To prevent a worse situation from happening, they must intercept Benjamin immediately. After checking the relevant map information, it was found that the fastest way was through a tunnel maze. It was called the Rat's Nest because of its steep terrain and dense rocks. To ensure that Benjamin could be successfully intercepted, Raph decided to lead some miners to enter with Nolan. Just as everyone was heading to the Rat's Nest, former Mayor Nicky started causing trouble. He visited Amanda in the mayor's office, saying he would be leaving for a while. The City of Resistance was in a turbulent time at this moment. Amanda was in urgent need of help, so she hoped Nicky could stay for the time being. Faced with Amanda's request, Nicky naturally refused. He knew the city was about to be destroyed, so he unhesitatingly rejected her. Then he immediately fled the City of Resistance by car with his men. On the other side, the team had arrived in St. Louis. They found no trace of Benjamin. At this point, Raph mentioned that there was a nuclear power plant underground. He suspected that was Benjamin's real target. Upon hearing Raph's account, Nolan immediately realized the danger. If the nuclear power plant exploded, the leaked radiation would be enough to destroy the City of Resistance. They immediately headed for the nuclear power plant. Sure enough, the group saw Benjamin there. When the other party saw that the plan was exposed again, he launched an attack on everyone without hesitation. After a brief exchange of fire, the team successfully subdued Benjamin. Raph was extremely angry about this. Benjamin had almost killed everyone in the city. The enraged Raph wanted to kill him immediately, but Nolan stopped him, because they still needed to find out the mastermind behind this series of events, so Benjamin couldn't die yet. Under everyone's questioning, Benjamin finally explained the cause and effect of his killing Luke. It's just that Raph was particularly angry because according to Benjamin, Luke had helped him carry out the sabotage plan many times, and the reason was that he hoped to leave the City of Resistance and break free from his father's control. Later, Benjamin had to kill him to prevent the plan from being exposed. Raph couldn't understand why his son wanted to leave him so much. Before Raph could continue to interrogate the reason, not to mention finding out the identity of the mastermind, Benjamin suddenly lashed out. He unhesitatingly pounced on Raph's gun. Then, before everyone could react, he committed suicide. Not long after, Nolan and his party returned from the mine. They told Mayor Amanda about Benjamin's death. Hearing that her secretary had betrayed and died, Amanda found it hard to accept and was also full of doubts. At this moment, she was more eager to find the culprit. However, before that, they planned to hold a grand memorial service to commemorate the dozens of people who lost their lives in the previous defense war. Meanwhile, Raph was listlessly going through his son's relics at home. He couldn't understand why his son hated him so much, even wanting to escape. He fell silent only when he saw some items he hadn't noticed before. But the troubles of the City of Resistance didn't end there. A few days later, a resident of the City of Resistance was jogging in the woods. He was followed by an unknown creature and then attacked by it. At this moment, the Ghost Riders who had helped before hoped that Irisa, who had half their blood, could return to their clan with them. Nolan was busy with the death of the resident. He could only put Irisa's matter out of his mind. Soon, Nolan and others arrived at the scene where the deceased was killed. After a brief investigation of the scene, Nolan found it incredible, because the victim was not only dismembered, but also had all their bone marrow sucked out. This was clearly not an ordinary attack. Just as Nolan was busy with the investigation, a new change occurred with Irisa. For some reason, strange visions appeared in Irisa's mind. They seemed to be memories that didn't belong to her. This made her somewhat confused, but she didn't tell anyone about it. At the same time, another resident was brutally killed. It's just that this time it was in front of a large crowd. At that time, the person was in the bar, planning to have an in-depth conversation with Amanda's sister, Kenya. At this moment, an accident suddenly happened. In just a moment, the man died on the spot. Kenya was in a panic and quickly called the police. After receiving the call, the relevant personnel rushed to the scene quickly. Unlike before, this time they also brought a doctor. After a professional examination, the doctor determined the man's cause of death. The deceased had a special pheromone on his body. This pheromone can attract hellbugs to attack. The man was killed by hellbugs. This was clearly a murder. For a time, people were in a state of panic. If effective measures are not taken in time, the number of casualties is likely to increase further. At this moment, Irisa noticed the tattoo on the deceased's body. That kind of vision appeared in her mind again. Irisa didn't want to expose her abnormality, so she pretended to be disgusted by the scene, and took the opportunity to leave the room. However, these things couldn't be hidden from Nolan at all, so he quietly followed her out. After seeing Irisa's discomfort, although Nolan didn't understand, he still told her to relax. Not long after, the investigation team found an empty hellbug egg sac at the scene. This kind of thing usually only appears inside hellbug nests. Obviously, the mastermind is very likely to be in control of an entire hellbug nest. In this way, the seriousness of the situation will be further enhanced. On the other side, the murderer struck again. This time, their target was Raf's daughter, Angie. At that time, she was a guest at Datak's home. The Datak family showed great enthusiasm for this prospective daughter-in-law. However, in fact, they looked down on this pure-blooded human. Datak thought Angie didn't understand their language, and was enthusiastic on the surface. In fact, he kept insulting Angie in an alien language. However, what he didn't expect was, Angie had been learning this language to integrate into this new family. She understood Datak's insulting words, so she left the table in anger. Her lover Arak followed her out. At this moment, Angie was attacked by Hellbugs. Hearing Angie's scream, Datak rushed over to rescue her. With great difficulty, he killed that Hellbug. Datak, worried that Angie might have another accident, decided to send her back to Raf immediately. Raf was not aware of what had happened. He saw that Datak had personally escorted his daughter back, thinking that the other party was showing goodwill to him, so his attitude towards Datak improved significantly. Not long after, Nolan led his team to Raf's house to investigate. During the careful inspection, they found that the same attack pheromone was attached to Angie's clothes. It was clearly done by the same person. To eliminate the hidden danger, Angie burned her clothes and took a bath to remove the pheromone from her body. Then Nolan asked Raf some questions, especially his relationship with the other two deceased. After all three were chosen as attack targets. There must be some connection behind it, but he didn't expect that Raf actually knew those two guys. They had a transaction a few years ago. For some reason, those two sold all their land to Raf. Hearing this, Nolan keenly realized that the Hellbug attacks might be related to the land, so he asked Raf for all relevant document details. However, after carefully reading through them, Nolan found no suspicious points. He couldn't help but wonder if his inference was wrong. At this moment, Irisa saw a black and white photo. A strange sense of familiarity surged in her heart. The photo showed a farm. It was the land that Raf had bought from a couple of the Irathian tribe many years ago. But what was strange was that the signature on the document was in human characters. Irisa keenly sensed that something was wrong, because more than a decade ago, aliens had not yet mastered human characters. They couldn't have signed in this way at all. Nolan, as a law enforcer, also sensed that something was wrong. He straightforwardly pointed out that the signature on the document was forged. Irisa immediately went to that farm, trying to find clues there. At this moment, those strange images appeared in her mind again. It's just that the content this time was more bloody. She saw two humans killing that Irathian couple. In addition, there was a member of the Ghost Riders beside them. This person was called Lin. He was one of those who had come to help resist the Vulge invasion not long ago. Irisa had a feeling that the answer was close at hand. Nolan's call pulled Irisa out of the illusion. After learning about her situation, Nolan also thought that Ghost Rider was problematic. The two immediately went to the leader of the Ghost Riders to discuss matters about Lin, but the leader told them that Lin had suddenly disappeared not long ago. Now he also didn't know where the other party was. This made the two more convinced that Lin was behind everything. Then Irisa explained the illusion she had seen to the other party, hoping that the leader could help arrest Lin. After hearing about Irisa's situation, the leader was particularly surprised, because he knew the source of Irisa's illusions. It was an ability to see the past, present, and future, and in the legends of the Irathian tribe, this ability originated from the blessing of the Irathian tribe's patron saint. In a sense, Irisa had obtained the power of the gods. The leader told Irisa that there was a ceremony in their tribe to help the recipient master this ability. With Irisa's consent, the leader immediately held a ceremony. After the ceremony, Irisa found that the illusion she saw became clearer. Moreover, as long as she concentrated, she could see the complete process of the entire event. From this, she learned why Lin wanted to kill those people. The couple of the Irathian tribe who were killed earlier were actually Lin's parents. They were brutally killed by two people because they refused to sell their land. What Lin did was just to avenge his parents. Through the illusion, Irisa also found the Hellbug nest, where Lin was currently hiding. Nolan was still somewhat skeptical at first. After all, this ability was really too bizarre. But when he led the team to the warehouse according to Irisa's instructions, they really found an elevator leading to the Hellbug nest. At this moment, even Nolan had to believe in the mysterious power in Irisa. Everyone took the elevator to go deep into it. To avoid being discovered by Hellbugs, they applied Hellbug feces to their bodies before setting off, thus hiding their scent. But an accident happened again while taking the elevator. Fortunately, no one was injured because of this. However, after walking out of the elevator, they were shocked by the scene in front of them, because the entire underground was full of terrifying Hellbugs. there was also a huge bug mother in the center. Several people planned to use bombs to clear these hellbugs, but they were discovered by Lin here. The other party was holding a can of attack pheromones. If everyone acted rashly, they would immediately perish together with them. Lin asked Nolan and the others to put down their weapons. Irisa kept persuading Lin to let go of the past. After all, those who killed his parents were already dead, but Lin remained unmoved. Seeing that the other party was unwilling to cooperate, he immediately released the pheromones. In an instant, many hellbugs swarmed towards Nolan and them. Irisa immediately threw a flying knife and hit Lin. Nolan took the opportunity to grab the pheromone container, and then quickly escaped to the elevator. Only Lin was left to be devoured by hellbugs in the chaos. After leaving, Nolan detonated the bomb, instantly blowing all the hellbugs to pieces. With a successful resolution of the hellbug incident, Amanda then announced that the land illegally occupied by Raph would be returned to the Irathian tribe. Whether to rent the land to Raph again afterward would be decided by the Irathian tribe internally. This resolution effectively bridged the long-standing gap between the Irathian tribe and humans. However, Lin, who triggered this incident, didn't die in that explosion. After being rescued, he was imprisoned permanently. Everything seemed to have settled down. The city of Resistance seemed to present a thriving scene, but the actual situation was that undercurrents were surging. Irisa was still troubled by those illusions, especially after the ceremony. The illusions in her mind appeared more frequently. No matter how hard Nolan tried to comfort her, he couldn't calm her down. She had seen too many disputes, and she would definitely see more disputes in the future. The relationship between alien races and Earthlings was still not optimistic. Irisa, as a mixed-race alien with superpowers, she would definitely play an extremely important role in this. More severe challenges were waiting for them. The above is the content of episodes 1 to 3 of Defiance. The first season of Defiance was released in April 2013. The material selection of the film was very novel at that time. It tells about the various contradictions faced by different races living together. It shows a wonderful world. However, the plot is somewhat weak. The narrative is also relatively slow. If you like my channel, please like and subscribe to it.